So good morning, everyone. Glad to be here. We have a great panel to kick things off here, talking about customer-centric culture. And I think to start, I'm going to have the panelists talk a little bit, just for context, about the work they do and sort of who they see as their main customers. And so, Amy, I don't know if you want to kick that off.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be here, and it's a great pleasure to be talking about. But I know it's a hard act to follow after Michael's opening about the need for customer engagement, and this is a good segue into the Department of Technology. Is we have really two roles. One is a traditional way, call it a control agency, where we want to make sure that the 150 departments in the state are doing the right thing and getting the appropriate guidance when it comes to service delivery. But instead of using the word control agency, we're really more of a checks and balance and making sure that the departments are doing their delivery of service within the guardrail. The second hat of Department of Technology, when it comes to the big, statewide initiatives such as, big infrastructure, big network, big data center, we do have a customer delivery side of it that manages services on behalf of the state of California. So with those two roles, it's a constant balance of what do we need to do to provide good guidance when it comes to checks and balance, at the same time, always keep in mind the customer service of who they're serving. Mm-hmm. So our customers really internal operation, the 150 departments, in order to enable them to deliver public service to the public constituents.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Joel?
Good morning. Yes, I'm Joel Riphagen. I'm from Fiscal, the Financial Information System for California. We are the state's ERP system, so we're back-end systems. We're very exciting for the citizens of California. But what we do at Fiscal is the entire budget of the state of California is produced out of Fiscal. All procurement through the state flows through Fiscal, and 152 departments do their accounting using Fiscal. And we are the largest IT project in the state, and we're also a department. So we wear a lot of hats, and as such, we have a lot of customers in a lot of different stripes. These range from our 4 partners, the Department of Finance, the Controller, the Treasurer, and the Department of General Services, who we have a very engaged, interactive relationship with. And then we've got all the folks at the state departments who use the system. So that's over 18,000 state employees. Over 8% of the state workforce use Fiscal in their daily jobs. That's sort of our primary customer base. And then a little bit more tangentially, we interact with the 76,000 vendors who are registered in Cal eProcure, and even the legislature and the public, who now have the ability to see the state's expenditures on our Open Fiscal transparency portal. But really, the core of our customer base is those state departments. We're not necessarily interacting with the public directly, but through our interactions with the state, we affect their interactions with the public.
Sure. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Andrew Peterson. I'm CIO, City of Oakland. Our primary customer, I call us an internal service bureau. We support the 22 other resident-facing departments that there are at the city, and we play a consultative role, somewhat of an enforcement role in terms of technology purchases. We look at all technology contracts, all technology in terms of software, hardware. We look at those things. Also, we believe our customers are residents of the city of Oakland, trying to look at things that are not particularly department focused. So one of the reasons we joined the city of Oakland is to have civic impact in our community. So we look at things that does not necessarily fall into a particular department. For example, public Wi-Fi, that's not necessarily any particular department. Looking at digital divide types of issues that affect the underserved, the disadvantaged. So those are the folks that we believe to be our customers and that we focus on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. So given the framing of the panel, I was hoping next if each of you could talk a little bit about how you go about trying to infuse a kind of customer-centric mindset into each of your departments. What does that mean to each of you, and how do you kind of go about that work? Amy, I don't know if you start? Sure, yeah. Okay. If you want to kick things off.
And I know that we initially talked about a couple of roles, but again, after Michael's opening and hearing the audience, we're asking questions anywhere from IT procurement to CalVets, better provide electronic health record And there's various conversation on what do we do to enable the state entity to better deliver public service. I'm going to pivot a little bit from the initial conversation. One area that when it comes to public constituents engaging with the state government, many of the time you start with a ca.gov website. And that's where that without having our public individuals knowing, do I go to Fish and Game to look for a fishing license, or do I go to, I don't even know what else do you do, renewal a driver's license or vehicle, but the mindset is you shouldn't have to have our individuals, that's another layer. Sometimes you don't know whether this is a federal service, a state service, or local. Especially within local, you shouldn't have to figure out, do I contact a county city or do I contact a state department? So with that mindset, about 2 years ago, working very closely with all of the 150 departments, and as well as Government Operations Agency and Governor's Office, in this case it was the Brown administration, we reinvented the ca.gov. And so if you guys look at the ca.gov today, compared to probably 3 or 4 years ago, it's a drastic difference. And the search capability, we call it the Google-like effect, that there's a bar and then you type in the word that you search, and then from there it takes you where the appropriate resource can be applied to you. And so those are the type of things that we actually reach out to the public constituents and then say, hey, what makes it more relevant for you to tap into public service? And I'm not going to go into the glory detail because I know Joe and Andrew have a lot more examples to share, but one thing I want to point out that I thought was pretty cool is we got feedback from the public to say, when I go to a website, if I see a coastline, does not represent where I live if I live more of an inland. So, to make that connection, our GIS team was able actually based on, where the search come from and locate into, I know it sounds a little scary, like exactly where you are. No, but in the regional area, if you're somewhere inland, it's more of, mountains and this place. Whereas a coastline, it resonates if it's actually, the Pacific Ocean. So those type of small thing goes a long way in making sure that we express the message that we do care about the public constituent.
One quick follow-up there before we move on. In terms of sort of gathering that feedback that informed the reworking of the ca.gov websites and then any improvements that came later, gathering feedback to make those. How did you go about collecting that? Was that surveys or what?
Right. So if twofold. One is this is where I think earlier we have internal customer, which is the departments that we serve in local, as well as the public customer that we serve them through those 150. So starting with the internal department, they have actually collected a lot of feedback on people that specifically come to their website, and it's a matter of working with them and collect those information and then prioritize. Second, there was a public forum, or I think this is about 3 years ago, more like just kind of like a feedback loop for people give us idea, and that's where I want to see coastline versus inland was the idea that came from public constituents.
Okay. And Joel, it's actually the year of the customer. Is that right?
That is what our director Miriam Ingenito has proclaimed. Yes. I think the state departments in the room could probably be forgiven for wondering why Fiscal is sitting up here talking to you about customer service, because we have had difficulty creating a user experience at Fiscal that everybody loves. We are a big change for a lot of state departments. And we've had difficulty because the system was designed really well to meet the technical requirements of our 4 partners, but less well to provide a seamless customer experience. And over the last several years, we've been building out a system. So we've been focused on building, we've been focused on onboarding departments. Now finally that the system is just about entirely built, and we have onboarded the vast majority of departments, we can begin to shift that focus from getting everything done to making the user experience better and more usable. So you're going to see that in a lot of ways over the course of the year, not least of which was a budget augmentation we got this year focused specifically on customer service. So you're going to see a lot more Fiscal staff and consultants out in the departments helping them complete their transactions and get up to speed. But a really nice tangible thing that we did earlier in the year, which I really like to talk about, is this event called Imagine Fiscal that we had. So it was a design thinking event. You know, when you trying to improve your service to your customers, it really helps to listen to your customers first. So we had this 3-day event where we invited 140 different participants from 36 different departments to come tell us what they wanted us to improve around training, around our customer service, and around the system itself. And we discussed pain points, and we brainstormed solutions, and we refined those solutions, and we ranked those solutions on difficulty and customer impact. And we came out of those 3-day sessions with 22 different fairly well-developed ideas from all of these folks that can really get to the pain points that they're feeling. And then we've taken those 22 and we've begun implementing the first 7 of them. And of those first 7, we're just about done with either the entire concept or the first phase of the concept, and we're rolling those out very shortly. So it was great that we could get to their pain points, but more than just getting to their pain points, demonstrating that we're actually listening and actually responding to their needs was phenomenal for them. We have departments who have had difficulty onboarding onto Fiscal, and some of the folks came into this event saying, "You want to improve the system? Give me back my old system. That's what I want." So we can't do that. But we did by demonstrating that we were really listening to their issues and really wanting to improve where we were falling short. We did bring around everybody to being sort of a productive, constructive participant, and not just for the departments that participated, but for our staff as well, who facilitated, and to the consultants who facilitated these conversations. They saw these departments interacting with us in a way that they hadn't before. We had one person from our change management office who was there facilitating a table, and at the end of it he said, "This is the best thing I've ever seen. You know, we've really not been able to engage the departments this way before." So I think the strong message from the top, combined with that early win that really demonstrated what we can do, is really beginning to shift the culture at Fiscal.
Sure. Quick follow-up there. So, I mean, in terms of what some of the key pain points that people identified were, or you know, how you're going about solving them, are there a couple examples you could provide there?
Sure. I mean, like I said, they came up with 22 different concepts. Some of them are, you know, changed the world.
Yeah.
And so those ranked high on impact, but also very high on difficulty. So they're not the things we're implementing first. But just some of the things like, I want a better way to submit tickets. I don't have a consistent form. So when I submit a ticket, I send an email, they send me an email back asking for clarification. We go back and forth several times. So a standardized form for submitting tickets, that's essentially done now. You know, I want better access to your subject matter experts. I can call into the Fiscal Service Center, but it takes a while to get to the subject matter experts. So we're implementing office hours for some of our subject matter experts and webinars for them to be more available. You know, I want a better way to access reports. There's a bunch of reports, but they're not well described and they're not easy to access on the system. So we designed a new page around that. So they range from the system to our training, to our customer service, and we're making advancements in all of those. And as we continue, we'll keep making progress and getting to sort of the meatier problems as we move along.
What's your sense of, not to go too far with this, but what's your sense of like what the hardest thing about the transition for a lot of these departments has been? Like, you know, switching to Fiscal from their old systems?
Sure. Well, you know, there are 152 different departments, and they all have different issues. I think a lot of the issue is, you know, a lot of them were using CalSTARS, which was the old system before. It's a transactional system. You can, an office tech can enter in the information into the system, and there are no guardrails, and there's no anything, and you can enter whatever information you want, essentially, in a lot of places into CalSTARS, whereas Fiscal enforces a lot of rules. It kind of requires somebody to know accounting, and some of those departments have had to update their skill sets because of that, so that's been very difficult for some of them. But Also, just the fact that Fiscal now enforces policies. We are not a control agency, but our 4 partners are control agencies, and they set policies that are then enforced through Fiscal. And so the departments have had to learn to actually do things the way that the policy says that it has to be done, where it wasn't necessarily enforced through the system before. And that has been a learning curve for a lot of them.
Sure. Okay. Andrew, you want
Sitting here thinking about how to answer this question. As I stated, we have two different customer bases, whether it's the internal departments or the external residents. And we engaged them both, I guess, directly and indirectly. Directly, as we're trying to fulfill requirements or work on requirements or projects for internal departments, we work with them at the beginning stage, the requirement stage. What is it that you want? What is it that you think you want? And let's walk through that. And what we're also finding at the beginning of the stage is that most of our departments don't know what their business processes are, right? And one of the things that we require is you need to know where you are, you need to know where you're trying to go, and we'll help you get there, because there's a lot of different paths from A to B. And so we spend a lot of time in the requirements phase understanding what your business processes are, mapping, I love this, the as is, and then going to map the to be. And then working with the customer to say, hey, have you thought about these other things, right? Taking the knowledge that we have from a consultative role in terms of technology, what's happening out there in the field. Have you thought about these other things? Have you thought about optimizing your business process? Have you thought about how you're going to use this data on the back end to improve your thinking going forward, so that as you move forward and making other additional changes, are they data-driven decisions, right? And the other thing that we've done or tried to do, or we're trying to do, is divide these projects up into manageable chunks, right? Large projects, by definition, fail, right? If we look at the statistics, large, complex projects, they always fail. We don't have that capacity. So we try to break these things up into manageable, consumable chunks where we can be successful, where we can maintain engagement. One of the other problems we have with our customers, primarily our internal customers, is a lack of engagement, right? And for good reason. Everybody's slammed. That's the term I hear. I'm slammed. I don't have the capacity. I want it, but I don't have time. Well, I'm not a subject matter expert in all the things that our departments do, right? I'm new to public service. It was eye-opening to understand or find out that we have over 350 services plus that we offer to our residents. I'm like, wow, who knew? And so we need to understand, and we need to have total engagement, at least for some period of time, with that subject matter expert so we can talk about what it is that we're trying to do. The worst thing you can do is not know where you're going, right? I use this term, if you don't know where you're going, you'll spend 40 days in the wilderness, right? You'll never make it to the promised land, or maybe it's 40 years, I can't remember. And so we engage in that way. Then as we break these things up into manageable chunks, right, we go back and get more feedback and assess, right? It sounds like agile, right? We got a new term, it's government agile, right? So I worked mostly in the private sector up until now. Agile means not only is a process, but it also has a connotation around speed to market or speed to production, I guess, in the case of government. And so we break these things up into manageable chunks, and we constantly get feedback, right, to understand, are we headed in the right direction? Now that we have more information, we've gone a little bit, we have more information, we can make a better decision as to what the next steps are. We also try to put ourselves in the shoes of the actual customer, the resident. Hey, I want to walk through the process. I'm going to be a customer. I've actually gone to the second floor of the planning and building and pretended I was a developer, right? I mean, I got a Q-matic number, waited forever, took a nap. It was brutal. But as we roll things out, we also go over and we do what I like to call random user acceptance tests. I'll go over there, we just added a new kiosk. I'll find a developer that's coming to the second floor, and I just grab them. Hey, come over, let me check this out. So it's not structured. They don't know what they're getting into. They don't know what they're planning. And we get better feedback in that way. And also, as we, indirectly, also directly, in these applications that we're rolling out that are web-based, we try to put a feedback loop, right? So you can automatically give us feedback. So as we're about to do release 2, right, we can incorporate those findings, those learnings into the next iteration. So we, not keep heading down the same path if we now have feedback that says we need to go in a different direction. I think indirectly what we try to do is we're gathering this information right on the back end. We're understanding what you're doing, and we want to use analytics to understand what it is that we should be doing, right? If I see you having a lot of touch points with the city in a certain way, that'll tell me what's the next service that I need to digitize, right? That'll tell me that, or if I see that you're spending 5 seconds or 5 minutes on a particular business process that we've digitized, when you actually should be spending 30 minutes there, something's wrong, right? We've done something wrong. Either the site is too difficult to use, it's not intuitive, whatever it might be. So that's the indirect feedback that we try to incorporate in our processes as we continually refine these offerings.
Mm-hmm. Is there a project that you're working on now that's a good example of what you just talked about there, something you've kind of broken into a smaller chunk, and you're going through this process with an agency or with one of the departments? Or
Yeah, so one of the things we've tried to do, we've created what I call digital service delivery platform. It's called Oak Apps, right? And what we've done is it's sort of guerrilla warfare. Since we don't really have a budget for this externally facing stuff, we get departments unknowingly, they contribute to my project. So as they want something, I take a little bit and I build something that will be beneficial for the entire city, right? So if I'm working on a project for a big department like planning and building, they have a lot of money, then we'll do something like a digital inbox that will benefit the entire city, right? So as I add more projects, everybody has to use the digital inbox to correspond back and forth with the resident. It's like my charts if you go to, well, you don't go to UCSF, if you go to Kaiser. And so we have that internal communication and we keep track of that, right? If one department wants to send out text messages, then we'll do the Twilio integration, but we'll do it for the entire city. So slowly we built up this platform delivery platform so that we get to a point that the next department that wants something, all I need to focus on is the business process. All the other things are there. The messaging is there, the customer relationship database is there, CRM is already there, text messaging is there, alerting is already there. All those things that are core, let's call it the greatest common denominator of services, are already there, and we can focus on the hardest part and the most important part, which is the business process, right? Projects are hard enough, so if we can eliminate that part of it, then we're good to go. So that's a project that we've spent a lot of time over the last two years doing in small chunks and refining. Digital mailbox started as PB Docs. And PB Docs was, hey, developer, you can now upload your plan from your home. You don't have to come over here and take a nap at the second floor and wait for your number to be called. Novel. But then it evolved, right, to just an upload to a whole digital mailbox where you can go in, you can get a notice. Hey, there's something in your inbox. You click on it, it takes you to the digital inbox. You have feedback back and forth. So that's the type of evolution, or back in the day when I was in school, we called it Stepwise Refinement. That's an 80s term. That we try to bring to bear on the projects that we have. And I think, hopefully, we're new at this, that it leads to more successful projects.
Sure. Amy or Joel, are there things that you heard there that sort of mirror what goes on at your respective agencies? Anything you'd add? Or?
Absolutely. So as Andrew shared that, and I also noticed earlier there's a lot of question of the new Office of Digital Innovation. Mm-hmm. And maybe I can also describe what is the other flip side, or the partnering side, sure, of Office of Digital Innovation with the Department of Technology. So first of all, within Department of Technology, there was a Office of Digital Innovation, or actually mm-hmm. say, we came up with the name of the Office of Digital Innovation, but then the governor liked the name so much, he's like, can I just use it for the new office? I'm like, sure. Out of 30 choices, he has to pick that name. So we renamed our Office of Digital Innovation to Office of Enterprise Technology, which is exactly to what, I shouldn't say exactly, very similar to what Andrew is describing, is that when you have a solution, or let's come in from both ends, when you have a problem that you don't know what that resolution can be, and we always said that to solve a problem is not always technology. Mm-hmm. It could be business process, re-engineering, and lots of things evolve. So Office of Digital Innovation would be a great place to start with that engagement, mm-hmm. to figure out what is the way to solve that problem. if that problem solving involves a digital service, and that digital service can be scaled to a statewide use, right? You invest once, you leverage. And that's where the Department of Technology's Office of Enterprise Technology comes to play, is that we provide that kind of platform to have these various services that can be scaled and repeated, if you would replicate it, to help other departments solving the similar problem. And then on the flip side, I see there's a lot of vendors in the room that, and I think Michael alluded to it as well, that there are times you already solved a problem. There's already a product in place. So why start from the scratch to say, I have a problem, help me? Say, hey, this is what we have seen from other places, and does the state want to adopt this? So, and involve that, all of you are reaching out to the various departments to see if there's a business case for it. But departments say, well, it's great, but I don't know whether it fits. I want to have a place to test this out. And so the Office of Enterprise Technology within the Department of Technology provides that platform, and we have an innovation lab to allow these products to be plugged in, so the individual customer department has a neutral place, if you would, to try it out. Say, does this work for me, or do I need to, tailor it a little bit? And that's the purpose of that innovation lab, to allow that, experiment, if you would, to take place. So we're seeing it coming from both ends: a problem, looking for a place to solve, and it could be technology or non-technology, or you have a very proven product that have already solving common problems that are out there that you want to introduce to the state. We would love to hear from you and provide that opportunity, and help the customer departments to really find what they need.
What's a good example there of something that you developed and then scaled from there, and were able to share across other departments once it was sort of up and running or fully developed?
So I'll talk about it from actually a system aspect, and then because there was a question about the innovative improvement on the IT procurement, so I wanted to dovetail on that question as well. I saw you just walking in. So from a system, I mean, this might seem quite rudimentary to you all, if most of you are from the private sector, but in the state of California, we don't have a standard way of tracking employees or moving, all of their training records. There are anywhere from defensive driving to sexual harassment prevention, or there's a lot of mandate training for employee and supervisors. And for a lot of state employee, we have 200,000. You should know the number, right?
It's about 235.
Yeah, to be exact. Many of them move from department to department, and through that, when they leave Department A, they don't have their record in Department B. So Department B would ask them to retake some of the training that they probably already fulfilled the mandate. And they move to Department C, and something that needs to be done, 2 years ago, they're getting a notice that you're out of compliance because I don't have your record. So from a customer service to our own state operation, with the purpose of, hey, gosh, we have to improve our integrated ways of, supporting our employee. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to recruit. We're not going to be able to retain. This very rudimentary effort to allow them to track their training history and also shows their growth path from the training aspect is something that was put in place about 2 years ago, and Department of Technology facilitated a multi-department conversation to what we call an enterprise HR. And learning management system was the first module to be tested out. So with that, we did open up a innovative procurement to have multiple vendors compete, to have a different options of learning management system to be offered to big departments, small departments, department that needs a lot of editing to it, various combination. But the common core is all of these systems need to be able to tie to a standardized employee core record, so that employee core record can be used as a central language to tie to the various learning management system. So that enterprise core record is a platform that we're going to be connecting with Fiscal, and I don't know, Joe, probably this is even before you, and tying to people's retirement, pension system, their training, et cetera, et cetera. So that's an idea that we did from, again, how to improve internal employee access to their own information to build this platform, and then start, putting in modules by module.
Sure.
From external facing, I just want to take a moment to to share with you, because Michael mentioned it as well, to pre-qualify vendor pool to allow the smaller startup company. I think there's another question about startup. We absolutely want to encourage startup to provide service and partner with the state of California. When I prior to joining Department of Technology, I was the agency chief information officer for Health and Human Services Agency. So the project that you heard of it, child welfare, I was one of the 5 strike team members who pivoted that went into a monolithic $500 million procurement into a very modular approach. And the scaling that we did from that idea is knowing in order to support that type of pivot into the smaller module, you have to bring a larger pool of consultants. Mm-hmm. So we started with the child welfare project, developing a pre-qualified vendor pool so that all of the administrative requirements are out. So when people buy it, they simply just need to put in a statement of work without having to go through, do I have reference check, do I have all of those in place? That's the pre-qualifying work. Once that pool was developed for the child welfare use, it got expanded to rest of the statewide use. So that we know agile development is common, right? And once the vendors get through their administrative qualification, you need to be registered in I don't even know what those administrative qualifications are. That's Department of General Services. Then we can use that pre-qualified vendor pool to only target on what is the statement of work, meaning how would you bring your skill set to help solve a problem. So that pre-qualified vendor pool is now 3 years later. We went through 2 iterations. Mm-hmm. It started with about 11 vendors, and now it's about 32 vendors, and that pool gets refreshed every 2 years.
Okay.
And it's for statewide use.
Interesting. So this came up when we were talking before the event. Amy, you brought it up, but I'm sure anyone on stage here can comment on it. The idea that sometimes good customer service when you're working with, this has more to do with working with other agencies as opposed to residents, but it's not always about saying yes. It's maybe sometimes like nudging the department you're working with in a different direction to get them where they want to go. Do any of you kind of have stories you can offer about, an example of when you sort of nudged a department you were working with in a different direction to help them to get where they ultimately wanted to end up?
Well, probably have a lot. I know. And I don't have a ton of examples. The first thing I have to say is I have to take exception to the statement that big projects always fail. They do frequently. Yes, exactly right. And so we're making that transition now to a more agile approach as well. As overseen by the Department of Technology, we began as a waterfall project before the state was even considering agile. We bring in departments to use our system all the time, and they have a varying set of experiences. And we are always attempting to get them in early to come to our user support labs to train them, and some of them just don't want to do that. So as opposed to having a specific example, to get them to do that, what we're really trying to do is build trust with them, mm-hmm. right? So we do that by forming these long-term relationships. We've got a customer an onboarding office, our customer relations folks who are really there trying to build that long-term relationship with the departments to build the trust and let them know that, yeah, we've gone through it before, and yes, we know this is hard, but if you don't do it now, it's going to be a lot harder. And we also build that trust by being honest about what we can and can't do. So we've got departments that want us to change how Fiscal does its reporting. Well, we can't change how Fiscal does its reporting, but what we can do is sit down with them and work out how to build something perhaps outside of Fiscal. So we're doing this with departments right now. We're building an entirely separate reporting system that's going to take a while to build over the course of the next year. But when we get there, we're going to get to a point where they can actually get the data that they're trying to get to, mm-hmm. That they can't get in Fiscal now. So we're moving that direction, but it's a big ship to turn.
Sure.
If I could, I kind of wanted to pivot back a little bit. We're talking about customer-centric design, customer-centric projects. And I think I'll just listening to Amy, it's important that we understand who's the center of what it is that we do. Who is the center? Why? Who are we trying to serve? Whether it's an internal or external department. And one of the things that we're trying to do in my department is stress we have to have one version of the customer, right? Now the customer may have multiple aspects. They may have children, they may have parking tickets, they may have whatever, multiple needs, but it has to be one version of the customer. And if you have one version of the customer and you start to collect information, I mean, we don't want to go overboard like in private industry. I mean, I look at a pair of shoes, and next thing I know, they're everywhere. I mean, I see ads of them everywhere. So private industry has gone overboard with it to the point where it's annoying. But the more I know about my customer, right, keeping my customer at the center of everything that I do, the more I know about my customer, the better it is I can serve them. I can understand what their needs are. If I know that my customer is constantly getting parking tickets or getting a boot and getting into more financial situations, as we know, I can send that customer an email to say, hey, did you know we have a parking app? Right? We got a parking app. You can put money on the meter. There's no reason for you to have to do this. Or did you know that we have assistance for paying these bills? Hey, I see that you're a renter. I see that your average income is in this range. Did you know that we have 200 units of affordable housing coming online in the Brooklyn Basin? You might want to get on the list. Hey, did you know that we have childcare? We have a great summer program. I see that you have 2 children, right? I can now serve my customer better if I know who my customer is. I understand what their issues are. I understand what their touch points are with the city, right? And then I can build the services, the programs that are necessary, that are needed to actually meet their needs. One of the lessons I learned, right out of the gate, I worked at IBM and I worked on a big project. It was called record level locking for a product called DB2. And you learn all these things in college, and man, I'm building this stuff in the lab, and it was actually called Santa Teresa Lab. And we're out building this stuff, and they're like, okay, great. And they send me over to Ford, and I'm chest is all out. Hey, we're going to do this, and this is going to happen. We're going to put that to sleep. The demon's going to come up, and they're like, hold up. That's not the real world. Right? So if we're off building things in an isolated lab, and we don't get out and understand the customer, you're going to build the wrong product. Right? It may be great on paper, but it's going to be the wrong product. So we have to keep the customer at the center of everything that we do, understand as much as we can about the customer's world, right? At this conference, and we were talking about the digital divide, and we're talking about public Wi-Fi. And why don't people take advantage of the Essentials program from Comcast? It's only $10. We're looking at it like, well, that's a great price. Well, we're not disadvantaged. And that $10 can buy some Pampers. That $10 can buy Infamil. So they're making choices that we don't make. We don't understand the customer. So it's of utmost importance, whether it's an internal customer or an external customer, to understand where they are and build products as to where they are, right? So, sorry.
With the couple minutes we have left, I mean, this thing has been mentioned now a couple of times. Big projects always fail. Like maybe that's not true, but big projects can become complicated, and especially when you have multiple large agencies working together. Amy Motor Voter might be an example of that, and we don't need to get into the weeds of that. But I'm just wondering if you could maybe offer any insight from your department's perspective, how advice you have or insights you have into working on big projects across, where multiple big agencies are involved, and sort of navigating those complexities.
Yeah, sure. And then having Joe sitting next to me, and I know that this is one thing that I would just advise, that don't make a general statement about things. There's so many uniqueness that if you truly care about what happened, take the time to understand. I mean, we do have one spectrum of, Fiscal probably being, labeled as the biggest project, because now it's close to $1 billion, and yes. It's 10 years old. And yes, it was painful in the beginning, and now that we're, getting close to the finish line, and kudos to the Fiscal department. Yes, pivoted from a waterfall to agile methodology, and then therefore we're getting that done. and appreciate that they're also taking recommendations from the Department of Technology to help them to get to that finish line.
Absolutely.
You mentioned motor voter, and that is big, not from a dollar amount, because the initiative, it's only about $2 to $3 million,
Sure.
but it has a big impact.
Right.
And unfortunately, when there's, there are glitches along the way at the beginning, folks are, because of the potential impact, there's a lot of tension around it. So without getting to the details of that, because again, that is a DMV and SOS,
Totally.
initiative, we were simply there to be, helping out at the 11th hour.
Sure.
I do want to share another initiative that may or may not known by a lot of folks in here, and ironically, you don't hear them because they're actually not going smoothly. And that's usually the nature. You hear about only the bad thing. It seems like this is exactly what's going on. That's 1% of.
Well, here's your chance.
Here's
Share the good news.
So let me ask you this. I'm sure everybody's aware of the cannabis implementation in 2018, right? You hear a lot about the regulation, regulating cannabis, and from a medicinal use later on to recreational use. And I'm sure you're all aware of it's a very, very short time frame to become a regulated industry. But how many of you have heard the technology system that's supporting that regulation to be in place was literally pulled together in less than 9 months?
Wow.
I mean, I'll just show a raise of hand. Anybody? Well, you have to because you're part of the stage. Yes, Cindy, thank you for that. And that was 4 systems from multiple departments coming from a brand new regulation that has been, regulating an industry that has been, not regulated for 30 years or so. And talking about working with a customer, you have customers that are folks that are the grower that does not even have Wi-Fi access for them to submit information to be, to apply for permits and this and that, to more sophisticated lab that they do testing to make sure the health or the quality of the product, if you would, are passing through, meets its quality requirement. So you have, I'm describing in this very high-level way but you have those 2 spectrum of customers that with multiple departments, with 4 of them being the core, but there's supporting departments, probably another 15 or so altogether, from tax collection, dealing with the cash receiving of, let's just say cash receiving, to how do you make sure that the transport of the cannabis systems are being closely tracked. And what you're supposed to transport, that if you have a permit to transfer 1 pound, you better not transport 10 pounds, because if you get pulled over, CHP is going to have a lot of questions. To how do you make sure that those type of a delivery, and then from the grower to the producer, from the producer to the store they're selling, all of those are being tracked. All of those, just thinking about it, gives me a headache. Right. And again, the regulation is already in place, and based on statute, everything needs to be up and running by January of 2018. And so the role that we had to do is to facilitate, and that's where there's also the opportunity to say no to some of the department. They all starting off, we need our own unique system, we need to all start over because everybody just have so many different needs. No, to the point is, let's not be frantic about it. Let's come together. Let's implement what needs to be done first as a minimum viable product. Let's figure out what are the common sharing data element that can be done. So perhaps, instead of going everybody, all 15 of you, go and find your own solution, let's see if we can come to 1 or 2 that are commonly used. So we have to bring those people in to get to that common, goal. And then talking to the various customers that are out there from, I don't even have Wi-Fi, if I don't have internet connection, how do you expect me to apply for a license online? Good point. How do we do that? To, hey, I don't want to submit paper. I'm so sophisticated in my lab. Everything should be electronic. How do you get to a common, understanding of that? All of those effort, 9 months, lots of investment, lots of conversation, lots of prototyping along the way, it came up.
We're out of time, but I think I'm going to just ask one quick last thing. If in a word or a sentence you could sort of describe what the key to making that project a success was, like what would it, just to kind of in a nutshell, like what do you think the essence of making it a success was?
A true collaboration. and true sense of willing to prioritize so you don't boil the ocean, but understanding what can be done first and what's coming, and level set that expectation all the way through. It was, yeah, very, very important.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, you guys. I think it was a great conversation, and we'll wrap it up and move on to the next one. Thank you.